Hi Gigi, come share an apple with me. I picked it fresh from Granny Smith's sinister tree. Don't mind my stories, you'll soon see. They're as dark and disturbing as they can be. Murmurs of secrets, bloody sodden crimes, Granny's bone-clicking tales will twist your mind. You'll be hanging on my words from the edge of your seats. Now how'd you like to go dig up some bodies with me? So go grab a shovel and gather around, 'cause 8 feet under is where they'll be found. This podcast contains detailed discussions of real-life crimes, which may include descriptions of violence, sensitive subject matter, and other potentially distressing content. Listener discretion is strongly advised. The material is intended for mature audiences only and may not be suitable for children or those who may find such topics triggering. Welcome back to 8 Feet Under with Granny Smith, your favorite hot granny. Just kidding. Anyways, I wanted to start off before I forget. I did get some feedback about the last episode where I had my bestie on it. Again, thank you, Brittany. I know the audio was a mess. I said in the very beginning the episode was going to be a hot mess. I knew we were going to get distracted. This is somebody I've known for 27 years, so I already knew we were going to get distracted. Also, I tell you a million times, I am not a pro at this. I struggle to edit and with audio when it's just me on here. Could you imagine? Picture me trying to do all that when there were two voices on there, talking over each other, laughing. I had to cut 30 minutes of bullshit out of that episode. I mean, it was fun, and we loved listening to it, but that episode was originally it was about an hour long before I edited anything. So, yes, I know it seemed like awkwardly placed comments or whatever. It's just because I had to cut so much out in the beginning, or not the beginning, excuse me, in between, but whatever. Anyways, you guys get the point. You know, if you want something professional, find another podcast. I don't know what to tell you right now. You get what you get with me, and I appreciate those who stay, those who support, those who love it. Thank you for the constructive criticism and feedback, all those things. So, I had to get that out of the way. Is there anything else? I guess we could just get right into it. So, today's story, it was not a suggestion that I'm aware of. I actually don't even remember where I heard of it, but it's on my long-ass list, so here we go. Tonight, we're going to be talking about a chilling, calculated story. This is a case about women who tried to leave, women who planned one last dinner, one final conversation, one clean break, and every single fucking time they vanished. This is a story about a man convicted of murder without bodies, suspected in more disappearances than the law could ever prove, and remembered by investigators as a real-life Bluebeard. So go grab those bedazzled-ass shovels so we can dig 8 feet into the life and crimes of Robert Dean Weeks. Welcome to the Bluebird Killer. Nope, the Bluebeard Killer. You're already starting off bad. Sources for today are a 2025 Fox 10 News article by Jessica Johnson, an episode of Unsolved Mysteries, hey, and the rest are in the show notes. Side note, I did have to look up what a Bluebeard is. I had no idea. So, if I don't know, I'm sure somebody else doesn't know. A Bluebeard killer is a man, often wealthy, who marries women and then murders them, inspired by the French folktale Bluebeard, where a rich man with a blue beard hides dead wives in a secret room. These killers typically seduce women, often for their assets, and then kill them, with famous examples including Henry Désiré Landru. No clue if I said that right. Probably not. Anyways, he murdered war widows for their money and then burned their bodies in his stove. This term also applies to serial murders of women, even if not specifically wives, and can be used to describe the act of seducing and abandoning many partners. So, there you go. You're fucking welcome. Alright. So, before Robert Weeks became a convicted killer, he was just a boy from Alabama, born in 1929. Apparently, not much is known about his childhood, and that silence can be telling. There were no stories of close family bonds, no childhood friends sleeping over, just a man who learned early how to reinvent himself over and over again. Friends and witnesses later described him as charismatic on the surface, capable of presenting himself as successful and charming, particularly to women, while privately being possessive, jealous, and extremely fucking violent. So Robert worked various jobs throughout his life, including real estate and business ventures, often blurring personal relationships with financial control. This would later become a reoccurring theme in all of his crimes. So he graduated from Mississippi Southern College in 1952, working his way through school as a mortician, a job that put him face to face with death. He was also a parachute stuntman, which was a job that thrived on danger. So he was really comfortable with death and comfortable with risk, which are two traits that would follow him for the rest of his life. So in 1954, Robert marries his first wife, Patricia. They moved to Las Vegas in 1955, and on the outside, things looked good. Don't they always? Robert became successful, eventually opening his own limousine service in 1960. Little public documentation exists about Patricia's childhood, but what is known comes from family testimonies and court records. So Patricia was described as responsible, maternal, and she was devoted to her children. She and Robert had 4 children together, and despite the turbulent marriage, which was marked by domestic violence, she remained focused on protecting her kids, and she was literally the foundation of their family. So behind closed doors, Patricia's life with Robert was a fucking nightmare. He was pathologically jealous, possessive, violent. Patricia wasn't allowed to go to the grocery store alone. She was beaten regularly, and oftentimes Robert confined her to their home. On one occasion, Robert saw Patricia sitting inside a car with another man. He confronted them, physically attacked Patricia, knocked her to the ground, and then continued to kick her while she was down. Then another time, in 1966, another violent episode unfolded when Robert saw Patricia seated on a piano bench with a male neighbor who was giving her a freaking piano lesson. Consumed by jealousy, Robert attacked the man with such brutality that he was left unrecognizable. The neighbor was hospitalized and remained in a coma for about 3 days, though he did ultimately survive the assault. So the violence continued to escalate, and Patricia eventually sought legal protection. On 2 separate occasions, she got a restraining order against Robert in an effort to shield herself from his abuse. By 1968, she'd had enough. Robert finally actually agreed to a divorce, so the divorce was finalized in April. Patricia got custody of the children, the house, and the Cadillac in the divorce settlement. Then on April 25th, while she was visiting a friend, Patricia gets a call from Robert. During this call, he threatens to kill her, and then later that same day, somehow Robert managed to convince Patricia to meet him for one last dinner. After the dinner, Patricia called her lawyer and expressed how terrified she was. She was never heard from or seen again. Her car was found abandoned at a shopping center. There was no body, no witnesses, no goodbye. Not long after Patricia quote-unquote disappeared, Robert takes their 4 kids fishing and to a movie, and then when the daughters asked where their mother was, Robert told them that she had abandoned them. But those who knew Patricia never believed that. Robert told Patricia's family, quote, "She either had a nervous breakdown or she's probably dead." End quote. Testimony later revealed that Patricia had absolutely no reason to leave her children since she just recently got custody of them in the divorce. And that she was constantly speaking about how she was in fear of her life because of Robert's temper. So Robert sells the limousine business in 1971, and then he got remarried briefly. His second wife, I know I'm going to mess up this name, Juanice, I think it's Juanice Hinkle. She survived the relationship, likely because Robert had already shifted his obsession to another woman. So he and Juanice divorced in 1974. Now, Robert's got his sights set on a woman by the name of Cynthia Jabor, a 41-year-old independent, successful real estate agent in Las Vegas. She was driven and financially stable. Friends described her as outgoing, social, and career-focused. She had plans, goals, and options, something Robert's ass did not tolerate well in the women that he dated. So she and Robert dated on and off for about 6 years, 6 long-ass years of control disguised as romance. So according to Cynthia's friend Susan Richard, Cynthia always said she would never marry Robert. Susan's husband said that Robert had, quote, shifty eyes, end quote. She agreed, noting that his eyes were, quote, cool and calculating, end quote. So Cynthia told Susan not to worry and that she could, quote unquote, handle Robert. By the fall of 1980, Cynthia had reached her limit. She agreed to meet Robert for one final dinner on October 5th, 1980, a date that was meant to end things with Robert. She never came home. Her car was found the next day in the Caesars Palace parking garage. There were no witnesses, and again, no body. So us FBI profiler, top secret agents like to call that a fucking pattern. So after 2 days go by with no word from Cynthia, her friend Susan, understandably, begins to panic. Calls to Cynthia's apartment went unanswered, and the silence just felt wrong. So, trusting her instincts, Susan contacted a locksmith, and with the assistance of the building security guard, she had the door to Cynthia's apartment unlocked. Later, Susan would describe the moment as unsettling and deeply emotional. Part of her knew she had no choice, she had to go inside, but another part of her was terrified of what she might find, fearing that she would discover Cynthia dead. Once she was in the apartment, Susan called out Cynthia's name, but there was no reply. She said that she noticed clothing was carefully laid out on the bed, yet there was no sign of Cynthia herself. Nothing appeared disturbed, but her absence was obviously impossible to ignore. So Susan began to fear one of two possibilities. She started to think that either Cynthia had abruptly left town with Robert without telling anyone, which would have been out of character, or that something far more horrifying had happened to her. Another close friend pointed to details that made Cynthia's disappearance even more alarming. She left behind expensive clothing and approximately $47,000 in a securities account, possessions that she just never would have abandoned voluntarily. So to those who knew her best, it was clear Cynthia had not simply walked away. Of course, Robert told the police absolutely nothing fucking useful. He claims that Cynthia canceled their date, so he agrees to take a polygraph and then he disappears. This time, he fled the country. Cynthia was last seen at 10:30 p.m. in the lobby of his Las Vegas condominium. On November 8th, 1980, Robert left the U.S. First, he went to Tijuana, then Chile, vanishing for almost 3 years. When he returned, he came back with a Libyan passport under the name Robert Smith and started a construction business. So now he's got this new name and a new life, but the pattern is still the same. He settled in San Diego, and with his new construction business, he sold nearly $1 million in phony stock to fund his lifestyle. And then he met another woman. So Robert broke his leg in 1983 while he was on vacation in Colorado, Longmont, Colorado. And during his stay at the hospital while he's recovering, he met a woman by the name of Carol Ann Riley. She was unaware that this Robert Smith was actually a convicted fraudster and suspected killer. Carol Ann Riley was born in 1944 and she was raised in California. She was divorced and she had moved to Colorado after she got her nursing degree at the University of Michigan. Friends described Carol as kind, reliable, caring, and someone who just always showed up when you needed her. At first, as always, things seemed perfectly fine, but over time, Carol started to see red flags, and by April of 1986, she was planning to leave. So on April 5th of 1986, Carol tells her friend Sheila DeMarzo that she had a date planned, one final meeting to end a relationship with the man she knew as Robert Howard Smith. You want to take a fucking guess as to what happens? She fucking vanished. Her car was later found at a Mission Valley Hotel parking lot, and again, no body, no witness. According to Sheila, Carol had come to a clear decision. Robert was not the man she wanted to spend her life with. Carol told her that she had planned to end the relationship and move back to Colorado and marry a doctor that she had been seeing there. While she was certain about her choice, Carol admitted she was anxious about the conversation that she was about to have with Robert, fearing it would be uncomfortable and emotionally difficult for her. So around noon, Carol spoke with her parents and she explained to them her intentions to break up with Robert. And then later that afternoon, she was seen by a coworker after a conference at their workplace, the Scripps Clinic, at approximately 5:30. So Carol spoke with her supervisor over the phone, and that call marked the last confirmed contact anyone had with her. The following morning raised immediate concern because Carol had failed to call into the clinic to check on her patients, which is something that she did routinely. Friends began calling her apartment, but no one answered, and as hours passed by, worry turned into fear. Concerned for her safety, Carol's fiance hired a private investigator by the name of Scott Gould. 2 days later, Scott entered Carol's apartment to search for clues, and as he moved around the space, he felt this growing sense of unease. Throughout the search, Carol's family repeatedly asked him whether he believed she was still alive or not. After completing his assessment, Scott told them that based on what he observed, he believed that Carol was dead. During his investigation, Scott uncovered Robert's true identity and learned about the earlier disappearance of Cynthia Jabor. So he quickly recognized troubling similarities between the two cases, similarities that went far beyond just abandoned apartments. One of the most disturbing discoveries involved Robert's personal diary, which apparently contained explicit and violent writings that were directed at Cynthia. At the time, Cynthia had been seeing another man named Art. Now, The articles have the quotes, which I'm going to read, and for whatever reason, some of the words were blanked out, but I assume they may just be cuss words, so I'm just going to read it as is. So one of the entries reads, quote, Cynthia and Art dead for sure, and Cynthia and Art dead blank damn you, end quote. In another passage, his rage was unmistakable. Referring to Cynthia, he wrote, quote, you are a dead blank. You have humiliated me beyond belief. I will even the score. A dumb blank like you deserves what you get, end quote. To investigators, the diary revealed a pattern of obsession, humiliation, vengeance, and emotions that appeared repeatedly just before women disappeared. Then we have the man who may have known too much. So Robert wasn't only suspected in the disappearance of women. Jim Shaw, Robert's former business partner, had disappeared after a dispute with him. Blood was reportedly found in Shaw's abandoned car, but his body was never recovered. Investigators believe that Shaw may have known too much, so Robert killed him. Then by 1987, Robert's pattern had caught national attention. NBC's beloved Unsolved Mysteries aired an episode detailing, quote, 3 women who vanished after trying to leave the same man, end quote. Viewers in Tucson, Arizona, shout out Arizona, recognized him immediately. So on May 16th, 1987, ranch hands near Lake Mead found female human remains that were buried in a shallow grave in the desert. The remains were a skull and some other bones that had been wrapped in a yellow blanket, and for decades, she was only known as Jane Doe. So this case was first presented on May 25th of 1987 during special number 2 of Unsolved Mysteries. It would later receive updates on September 24th, 1987 in special 3. Then on May 18th, 1988, it appears again on special number 7. So years later, the case was revisited again in the version of the series hosted by Dennis Farina, airing on July 30th, 2009, and then again on March 15th, 2010. So back up to the evening that the episode originally aired in 1987, viewers began contacting KVOA in Tucson, Arizona, as well as the Tucson Police Department. Callers reported that they had recognized the suspect, Robert Dean Weeks, as a local businessman using the name Charles F. Stolzenberg, something like that. Under that alias, Robert had been operating a company called Snuff It, which manufactured ashtrays. He'd been residing in a Tucson neighborhood since May of 1986. One of the callers was Robert's own girlfriend. She had learned about the broadcast after several of her friends watched the episode and told her. So according to reports, she was stunned by the news, and only then she kind of realized, ooh, the man I'm dating was not who he claimed to be. Good God, could you imagine getting that news? Like, hey, Bessie, want to go grab a drink later? And oh, by the way, the guy you're dating is a serial murderer, and he's all over the fucking news. Yikes. Anyways, moving on. At 3:30 p.m. on May 26, 1987, the day after the broadcast, a detective approached Robert at his place of business and greeted him by saying, quote, hi, Robert, end quote. When Robert responded to the name, officers immediately took him into custody without resistance. In an unusual coincidence, one of the detectives involved in the arrest was later identified as the ex-husband of Robert's girlfriend. So following the arrest, Robert's business partner, Gene Irwin, was interviewed by authorities, and Irwin describes Robert as friendly but highly guarded, noting that he rarely spoke about his past. Also recalled Robert telling him that he had watched the Unsolved Mysteries broadcast, but he, quote, didn't figure any of his friends would be watching, end quote. So then on July 6th, Robert Weeks was formally charged with first-degree murder in connection with the disappearances of Patricia Weeks and Cynthia Jabor. Additional charges included fraud and forgery. Investigators revealed that 9 years after Patricia's disappearance, Robert sold a property that had been awarded to her in the divorce settlement. To complete those real estate transactions, he allegedly brought another woman with him to those notarizations, and she falsely identified herself as Patricia. In April of 1988, Robert Weeks stood trial in Nevada for the murders of Patricia Weeks and Cynthia Jabor. Despite no bodies or remains ever being found, prosecutors would later argue that Patricia was Robert's first known murder, killed because she dared to leave him. Witnesses testified to violence, confessions, threats, and other chilling patterns. Thank God, Robert Weeks was convicted and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Robert Weeks died in prison on September 20th, 1996, taking so many fucking unanswered questions with him. But we did get one question answered. So remember our Jane Doe from earlier. Investigators had reached out to the University of North Texas to determine whether the available DNA extract was viable and sufficient enough for a forensic genetic genealogy investigation. After reviewing the material, the Mojave County Sheriff's Office was told, quote, the sample was too degraded for analysis of this type, end quote. Still determined to identify the victim, investigators made another attempt in February of 2025, submitting the victim's clothing along with the blanket that she had been wrapped in to the Arizona Department of Public Safety Crime Lab in Flagstaff. The goal was to recover DNA suitable for a genealogical test. Then finally, a breakthrough came. On July 15th, 2025, almost 40 years later, DNA finally gave a name to the Jane Doe found on May 16, 1987, near Lake Mead. Investigators were contacted with new information. An email revealed that a forensic odontologist working alongside staff from the Missing and Unidentified Persons Unit of the California Department of Justice had conducted a dental comparison between the Jane Doe remains and a woman who had gone missing decades earlier. In 1986, from San Diego County, California, case number 86-030036, listed in NamUs as MP9411. That dental comparison confirmed the match. As a result of the analysis, investigators positively identified Jane Doe as Carol Ann Riley, born December 13th, 1943. Even though there are so many unanswered questions still, Robert Weeks was finally caught and his ass died in prison. And that, Granny's Gravediggers, is the story of the asshat Robert Dean Weeks, aka the Bluebeard Killer. You know what time it is. Shovels up. Let's debrief and discuss. I hate not having answers. I need the rest of the women found. I need his former business partner, Jim Shaw, found. To my 2.5 listeners, is there anyone out there who thinks this is a coincidence? Like women just happen to disappear around this guy right after going to dinner with him or wanting to break up with him? Anybody think that? Nah. Me either. I hope not. Because I think he was a narcissistic psychopath who couldn't deal with being rejected, not getting his way, and couldn't deal with women leaving him. So he kills them. Just like it's nothing. It's fucking wild. And the business partner, poor guy, why did he have to die? Why did he have to disappear? What happened there? They had a dispute and then the guy disappears, vanishes off the face of the earth? Not a coincidence. Anyways, as always, keep the suggestions coming. DM me on IG, Facebook, TikTok, X, the handles at the number 8 FTUNDERGS85. And again, for Facebook, you can search it that way, I believe, or just spell out 8 Feet Under with Granny Smith. Boom, there's my page. Until next crime, stay safe, stay curious, and remember, an apple a day keeps the motherfucking murderers away. Granny loves you. Bye.